Well everyone, we have already reached our next milestone, 7,000 subscribers. Not to mention, this is also the 50th history video I've made for this channel. How the hell did it take me this long? And because the subject of this video is something I have not historically had copyright troubles with, it won't have to be a Dailymotion exclusive this time. That's because the subject, or subjects, of this video are two channels that I have gotten many requests for over the years, but are not from the US. They're not even from the Western Hemisphere. No, to find the channels in question, we have to head to the other side of the Atlantic Ocean to the United Kingdom. It is here that we will find CBBC and its sister channel, CBeebies. Of course, I did not grow up with... I am terribly sorry about that. I have no idea what happened to my voice just now. Anyway, I did not grow up with either of these channels, of course, but I did grow up with shows like Teletubbies, Booba, 64 Zoo Lane, Bob the Builder, Pingu, Pinky Dinky Doo, and Tinga Tinga Tales, which all aired on one or both of these BBC channels in the UK, though I saw them on Noggin and PBS Kids here in the US. I also watched YTPs growing up, and through these, I saw glimpses of other shows that aired on CBBC and CBeebies, like Postman Pat, Fireman Sam, and Brum. I even watched the entirety of seasons 1 through 5 of Fireman Sam a few years ago just to see how good it was. Though I didn't dare touch any of the later seasons because I know they were god-awful.
When he hears that fire alarm, Sam is always cool and calm.
But my second largest viewing demographic after the United States is the United Kingdom, and my British viewers have been requesting these two channels for years. So I knew I had to cover these two at some point. Though these channels are huge in the UK, a lot of people in my American audience have probably never heard of them, so it'll be great to introduce them to what is basically the British equivalent to Nickelodeon and Nick Jr. So grab a cup of coffee, or tea, and enjoy. The BBC has aired children's programming since the very dawn of television in the 1930s. However, what we know today as CBBC began to take shape in 1985. In September of that year, the children's block on BBC One was rebranded as Children's BBC and given its own dedicated logo. One way that Children's BBC differed, and CBBC continues to differ, from Nickelodeon is that rather than a series of bumpers introducing shows all the time, the channel is hosted by an actual person. On launch, that person was Philip Schofield. At the time, the BBC was only able to provide Schofield a small space, supposedly a broom closet, to host Children's BBC in. As such, Schofield referred to the space as the broom cupboard, and this eventually became what the BBC officially referred to the space as. In 1991, Children's BBC was given a new logo, and it was, in my opinion, really good. It kind of reminds me of the original Teletoon logo I mentioned in the last history video. The 90s and 2000s were seemingly a zenith when it comes to kids' TV logos. Anyway, it was also in the 90s that Children's BBC's rivalry with BBC's main competitor ITV's equivalent series, Children's ITV, began to really heat up. Around this time, Children's ITV began being referred to informally as CITV, and so Children's BBC also began being abbreviated to CBBC. This change from Children's BBC to CBBC was made official on October 4th, 1997, when the block was officially rebranded to CBBC. It was during this time, between 1996 and 1999, when CBBC programming was shown on Nickelodeon in the UK, with CBBC on Nickelodeon. Another thing that happened during this time was the launch of BBC Choice, which was Britain's first digital TV channel. CBBC would air in blocks on BBC Choice until 2002. It was also in 2002 that CBBC finally gained its own separate channel, and another new kids TV channel, CBeebies, also launched on the same day, February 11th. But we'll get to CBeebies later. After the launch of dedicated kids channels in the BBC lineup, the original children's blocks on BBC One and BBC Two began to decline in viewership. By the turn of the 2010s, this had become such a problem that it was decided to end children's programming on these two channels and focus everything on CBBC and CBeebies. And so the kids block on BBC One was discontinued on December 21st, 2012, and the same happened with the block on BBC Two on January 3rd, 2013. In September 2018, the children's block on BBC Alba, which is a channel that airs only in Scottish Gaelic, was split into CBBC Alba and CBeebies Alba. Until the mid-2010s, CBBC actually shared its channel space with BBC Three, which came on in the evenings at 7 o'clock p.m. and would run until CBBC started airing for the day at 6 o'clock a.m. On April 11th, 2016, however, BBC Three was pulled from the air and made a digital content hub on the BBC's on-demand streaming service iPlayer. After this, CBBC's daily schedule was extended 2 hours to 9 o'clock p.m., with the 2 new hours focusing on content for older kids. This didn't last though, and on January 5th, 2022, BBC Three returned to the airwaves, and CBBC returned to its former 6 o'clock a.m. to 7 o'clock p.m. schedule. Also in 2022, the BBC announced that CBBC and BBC Four, and by extension CBeebies, would be discontinued in 2025 in order to focus more of their resources on digital services. I suppose we'll have to see if that ends up coming to fruition. Now on to CBeebies, which is more similar to Nick Jr. as it is aimed at kids 6 years old and younger. As mentioned before, it was launched on February 11th, 2002 alongside the new CBBC channel. Much like how CBBC shares its channel space with BBC Three, CBeebies shared its channel space with BBC Knowledge. This only lasted for a few weeks, however, and on March 2nd, 2022, BBC Knowledge was replaced by BBC Four. Much like CBBC, CBeebies is hosted by actual people, and CBeebies' hosts at launch were Sue Monroe, Chris Jarvis, Cindy Sloan, and Pui Fan Lee. Unlike CBBC, CBeebies retained the same logo it had used at launch for over 20 years. On March 15th, 2023, however, that all changed, as the CBeebies logo was updated to fit in line with the BBC's new, wider corporate branding starting in 2021. Of course, the CBBC logo was also updated in the same year. If I had grown up in the UK, I'm sure I would have loved CBBC and CBeebies. Postman Pat and Fireman Sam seem like they definitely would have been childhood staples of mine. Then again, I can't imagine growing up without shows like Crashbox and Harold and the Purple Crayon. In any case, I think I speak for all of us when I say that I hope the 2025 plans to shut these networks down doesn't actually go through. Hopefully, these channels will last into the foreseeable future. Let me know in the comments, if you grew up with CBBC and CBeebies, how do they compare against similar networks? How likely do you think it is that these channels will be shut down in 2025? Anyway, thanks for watching, and thank you all so much for 7,000 subscribers. As always, stay tuned.
Yesterday I met with sweet Dorothy. She said tomorrow I'm joining in matrimony. And if you act right, you can take me out tonight. It is wine and dine and get back in time. Baby, bam bam bidi, bam bam bidi. Baby, bam bidi, baby, bam bam bidi. No didi bam, no no, no bam didi bam bam bidi bidi bam didi bam 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 didi. She said I am entering in high society. You must be careful about the place you are taking me. Cause if you slip, I slide, and I may never be a bride. It is a BBDD bam bam.